story tonight and discuss the developments in terms of this new drug that's been purported as the breakthrough drug for COVID-19. Aspen CEO Stephen Saad joins me now. Good evening and thank you so much for your time tonight. I wonder, how closely were you at Aspen watching the work of these researchers at Oxford, as of course they were carrying out this trial?
You know, we only heard when you heard the results of these trials. There have been so many drugs tested from so many different companies, and while the world's working towards a vaccine, many of the existing products are being used. So literally we knew when the public knew.
Were you surprised at all?
I was. I know that. It's a steroidal product, an anti-inflammatory product. So clearly, it had some benefits. The extent of the benefit did surprise me, to be honest. It was really pleasing to see that we're getting some products that are being trialed properly and making a big contribution. I'm very pleased that we can be a part of assisting in this pandemic.
As a leading pharmaceutical company, one would imagine that there are various trials that you're carrying out by yourselves in terms of testing possible vaccines.
So from a purely Aspen perspective, we've been incredibly busy keeping our facilities open and making anesthetic products, and we are leading supply globally of anesthetics, and certainly all supply lines, and we're very heavily tested when the European pandemic hit a peak. We have worked very hard on building a sterile-based business, as you might know, which is critical because anybody who wants to make a vaccine will require sterile capabilities. So we're really hopeful that we might be part of a process where we are part of the formulation of a vaccine or different vaccines. But certainly numerous of the big multinationals have approached us to discuss our capacities and capabilities.
Let's speak then about the demand for dexamethosone going forward. What are you anticipating that is going to be?
It's something we've been working on very hard all day, was to, one, understand demand, what real demand is, because what we have seen with COVID and with all the issues around it, there's often been panic buying and buy-ins. So, and we've also then had to match it with our supply to understand what supply we had. Now, certainly, we know we've got manufacturing capabilities that cover global volumes, and we could comfortably manage big volumes globally. However, we were worried that we might not have sufficient APIs, which is the chemical that goes in the product, for a sudden surge or spike. Fortunately, we do tend as a company to hold a lot of stock, and in this instance, we do have a fair bit of stock in the chemical in the API form. So, yes, we're now just trying to work out through all the different organizations, the WHO, the individual markets. For example, the South African government contacted us to understand what we could provide, not only for South Africa, but for the whole of Africa. So we're busy trying to collate all of this to understand what a realistic demand might look like and what we as a company might be able to supply against that demand.
Sure. And just for clarity, is Aspen the only pharmaceutical that produces this drug?
No, there are some countries, in some places, where we are the only company, but there are other manufacturers of the product globally in other jurisdictions.
Sure.
But we're certainly one of the largest suppliers of the product.
Sure. Certainly then becomes good news for South Africa. Let's talk about the rising of your share price by 10% in just one day.
I wish I can talk to you about drugs, but the share price, why it goes up and how it comes down is things that I've never been 100% sure about. I'm hopeful that the reason it's gone up is that, there are a lot of people who have been unsure if our strategic intent to move into steriles and the sterile business and move into niche pharmaceuticals like steroids was a correct strategy, and whether the investments we made were too heavy. I'm hopeful that with current events, when we see what we've achieved at anesthetics, now in steroids, and hopefully in time, is hopefully part of some solution around the vaccines, that people might see the vision that we had some time back. So hopefully that's the reason it's moved.
Sure. And before I let you go, what does this mean for South Africa?
I think for South Africa, I think it's very important to have security of supply. We've seen what happened when the pandemic hit. Many countries, for example, in China and India, just didn't allow exports of critical chemicals. And I think that it's very important for every country, and it's not just South Africa that's seen it. We get it out of Australia and a lot of the other territories in Europe now saying, we need to have our own, we need to have the security of knowing we can make our own medicines and people to call on. Because not everyone's going to put South Africa first. Yes, of course Aspen will. But if Aspen wasn't here, who would we turn to?
And just in terms of the costing, it currently costs 150 Rand per injection, I believe. Any chances of that decreasing now that demand seems like it's going to be on the up?
Yes, I think our injections are a little bit less than that. I think our injections are around about 50 or 60 Rand, if I'm not mistaken, in the South African market. And the tablets must be, I think it's about 3 or 4 Rand. Look, I must be honest, this is the last thing we've looked at. The first thing we've looked about is the global patients and patient base. But I think it's a pretty affordable injection, and so is the tablet. So if it helps as much as clinical trials have shown, it's a very cheap treatment and therapy to save all that time in hospital and mostly to save lives.
It sounds a bit like discovering a pot of gold in your background, doesn't it?
Look, we've got lots of pots of gold in Aspen. We've spent a lot of time trying to work on these type of things. Right from if you think about what we've done, we've always liked to see ourselves as a company that's really tried to serve humanity to the best of our capabilities. And it's, we've started with the ARVs, we've done multi-drug TB, and we really tried hard in this pandemic as well. And, I've got to really thank all those people in the factories who risked a lot by going out there in the middle of the pandemic in Europe and continue to, for example, in the Eastern Cape in South Africa and the Western Cape, to keep the factories turning and to keep sure the medicines go. And yes, we've got a pot of gold. I think the pot of gold in Aspen is really the people that work within it and the commitment they've shown.
All right, let's leave it there for tonight. Stephen Saad is the CEO of Aspen. Certainly a good day for them following that discovery by Oxford researchers. The board